Welcome to Diane Marie Home, where I share DIY, gardening, cooking from scratch, and creating cozy spaces on a budget in our 1800s farmhouse in upstate New York. Today, I am sharing about our home freeze dryer and how to make one of our favorite snacks, which is freeze dried bananas. At the end of the last garden season, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed because I am super busy and it takes a lot of time to grow a garden with two babies. So I was feeling frustrated with not feeling like I was able to preserve my garden as well as I wanted to. So I did a lot of research and I came across freeze drying and freeze dryers. After doing a ton of online research, I decided that a home freeze dryer was going to be a good fit for my personal food preservation needs, in addition to just creating a new way to make a lot of healthy snacks for my kids. So I ended up purchasing a harvest rate freeze dryer, and one of the first things that I made in it was freeze dried bananas because I got it after harvest season. I didn't have a lot of things coming out of my garden, and organic bananas are one of the cheaper organic foods you can buy from the grocery store. So I figured it would be a good way to kind of test out the machine and see what it could do. Prior to investing in this machine, I was buying freeze dried strawberries from the grocery store, and just a small package that my one son would eat in one sitting was, I think, $7. So it's safe to say those were a very special treat and definitely impacted my decision when deciding to invest in this, because I figured if I could make things like freeze dried strawberries at home, not only would I not have to buy those things from the store, but I would be able to make way more freeze dried snacks than I would ever be able to afford to buy using either food that I bought from the grocery store that was just fresh, or eventually food that I grow in the garden. Like I said, freeze dried bananas are nice because bananas are so affordable compared to other fruits, especially when you buy organic fruits. So when I make freeze dried bananas, I buy several bunches at a time. As you can see here, I should really try to keep track of how many bananas fit in one freeze dryer load, but I never do that. I just buy a full grocery bag full of bananas. It's probably like 8 to 10 bunches. And then I bring them home and I just let them sit there until they get to their peak ripeness, which is what I like. I like sweet bananas. So you can see they have the brown spots. They're not fully brown, they're not soft and mushy, but they are at their ideal time to eat, in my opinion. This is the flavor that I like. And then when you freeze dry them, it enhances their flavor even more, and they taste so sweet without adding anything to them. They are so good. So once the bag of bananas turns to the ripeness that I prefer, I get out a big bowl and I start processing all the bananas. I like to work in batches of about 5 or so bananas at a time. So I'll peel about a bunch, and then I will slice them and put them on the freeze drying trays. Before I start this process, I do go back to my freeze dryer and turn it on because it takes about 15 minutes for the chamber to cool. And so it's just to get that going before I start peeling the bananas and everything, so it's all ready to go by the time I have all of the bananas prepared for the freeze dryer. You can see here how I am lining up the full bananas that have been peeled. This has been the quickest and easiest way that I've found to prepare the banana slices, because to freeze dry them, you want all of the slices to be pretty much the same thickness. And when I first did it, I was cutting each slice individually, which took forever, and it just took a really long time. So this has saved a ton of time. You just line up the bananas. I usually do anywhere from like 4 to 6. 6 is kind of a lot though. You need to kind of hold them all together like you see here. I'm holding them all with my one hand and then using a sharp knife to just slice down and make all even cuts. The ends I usually kind of put in a pile and let my kids snack on those while I'm getting this together. But what you can see is it's tricky on the ends, but I try to keep the slices together so they don't kind of fall off, but they stay in the form of the whole banana, if that makes sense. And it'll probably make more sense when you see why I try to do this, because when you move them over to the pans, another way to save time is to hold on to about half of the sliced banana together, move it over to the pan, and then layer them out. I found by far the easiest way to layer them is to move half the banana over and then just press down very gently on the sliced bananas, and they almost layer themselves. You want the top of one banana slice to fall at about the middle of the previous banana slice, and this ensures that the slices won't stick to the pan during the freeze drying process. And when they're finished and you go to take them apart, they come apart pretty easily and they usually don't break. When I was first doing this, another method I tried was putting them all on a skewer, and this allowed me to space them apart individually while still fitting a lot on each pan. And it took so much time. And when I went to take them off, when they were all done, a lot of them broke because the sugars kind of stuck to the wood shish kebab stick, and it just wasn't worth it in the end. So this has been by far the most efficient way I've found. And the reason you want to try to make the slices about the same thickness is just so that they process evenly throughout the freeze drying process. It'd be like if you put a 7-pound chicken in to cook with a 2-pound chicken, they're just not going to cook the same. So the more consistent your slices are, the more consistent your results are going to be, and they'll finish around the same time in the freeze dryer. I just continue this process until all of my trays are full. I have a large freeze dryer, so I have 5 trays to fill up, and with the method that I use, it fits a ton of bananas. And from what I've found, I don't use anything like lemon juice or anything to try to prevent the bananas from turning brown. I found it's not necessary. They really don't brown too much in the process of preparing them. Before I was freezing each tray as I finished it, I don't really think it's necessary. So now I just set them aside until they're all done, and then I move them all into the freeze dryer at the same time, and I haven't had a problem with them turning brown or going bad during the time it takes for me to get them all ready. Something that is nice about freeze drying though is that you can pre-freeze the food to shorten the amount of time it takes for the freeze dryer to process. And so if you did want to work in smaller batches, you could do just a tray at a time and put it in the freezer, and then they could just stay in the freezer until you got around to filling the next tray, and you could just work through at your own pace. And once they were all in the freezer, you would want to make sure all trays were frozen before you put them in the freeze dryer. You could just move all the frozen trays of food into the freeze dryer and then start the process, and that will actually cut down on your overall freeze drying time. Once all my trays were done, I started moving them back to our freeze dryer. I think, in my opinion, the biggest downfall of a freeze dryer are they are so big and bulky. It's not something that you can take down in between uses and put into storage. They kind of require their own designated space. And as you can see here, we designated this little closet under one of our sets of stairs for our freeze dryer. Since we have the large freeze dryer, it also requires its own special outlet. So this is just our designated freeze dryer location. And unfortunately, it's on the opposite side of the house as our kitchen, but it's not that big of a deal. I just have to walk the trays over and then walk them back when they're all done. Here I'm just loading all of the trays into the freeze dryer. It had already completed its initial cooling process. I think I forgot to do this on this batch, but something I found helps with ensuring a good seal is to just pull the large round gasket out about 1/4 of an inch before I shut the door for the final time. I found that is helpful. I'm not sure if it's necessary. You also want to make sure that gasket is nice and clean before you close the door and start the process. But once the trays are loaded, you just close the door and make sure the drain valve is closed and follow the directions on the screen. It's really pretty straightforward and simple. Another little tip that I learned is to program your machine to include an extra 12 hours of dry time. Doing this is incredibly helpful when you have a batch that finishes in the middle of the night, like this one did, because then you don't have to worry about waking up whenever the batch is going to finish to check on it or process it. You just know that it's going to go into extra dry time and it will be ready for you whenever you get to it the next day. This batch took about a day and a half to complete and finished in the middle of the night. So this was the following morning. I woke up and followed the directions on the machine to take the bananas out. You have to open the drain valve to break the seal and then check your batch to see if it is complete or if you need to continue with additional dry time. These were definitely done since they had already gone through quite a bit of extra dry time, so I took them all out and got ready to put them away in storage. When I first did this, I was so nervous that the second they hit the air, they were going to start taking in moisture, and I haven't found this to be the case. I found that I can take all the trays out at one time as long as I'm ready to package them up and they won't be sitting on the counter for hours. But it definitely doesn't have to be a super rush process, and they don't absorb the moisture in the air like a sponge would water. So you do have some time to work with them, which is nice. You can see here I actually added some cranberries to this batch because I ran out of bananas and I had frozen cranberries in the freezer, and they're really good. I've actually also found that you can crunch up the freeze-dried cranberries and use them like you would sprinkles. They retain their vibrant red color and they're really pretty. They're also very tart. They make a really tart snack. I like to store most of our freeze-dried food in mason jars, but you can also use Mylar bags. I don't usually use an oxygen absorber. Those you would want to use more if you were trying to store something long term. But when I make things like banana slices or something that we're going to eat for a snack within the next few weeks to a few months, I don't worry about an oxygen absorber. But I do use a vacuum sealer. This little handheld electric vacuum sealer has been a great way to just make things like freeze-dried food last longer. So you wouldn't want to use this for something that actually needed to be water bath or pressure canned, but for things like dried goods like freeze-dried food or herbs, anything dried that's already shelf stable, you can use this to take additional oxygen out of the container just to help the product last even longer on the shelf. This is an electric one that I'm using, but I do actually want to get just a manual one because then I won't have to worry about making sure the battery's charged or anything. So I'll link that one and all of the other products that I've used for this recipe in the description, but you can also find all of the directions for making freeze-dried banana slices and all the products that I used in the related blog posts that will also be linked in the description. And that's really it. These are really easy to make. They're my kids' favorite snack to eat because they taste like candy to them, even though there's no added sugar or anything. And they are perfect for snacks on the go. It's way more affordable than buying freeze-dried food from the store, although the freeze dryer itself is a large initial investment. If you do a lot of preserving and a lot of cooking from scratch, making your own snack, you would likely get a lot of use out of a freeze dryer like I am. I was really nervous to invest in this machine because it is so expensive, but I did all my research and ultimately decided it was a good fit. I'm so glad I got it. Our machine did have an issue. I noticed it after a few batches and I was a little concerned, but this company had no idea who I was. I didn't work with them in any way. I just bought the machine myself because I wanted it. And when I reached out with the issue, they were amazing to work with. They had excellent customer service. The troubleshooting was a little challenging. It did require some knowledge of electronics, which my husband thankfully was able to handle, but we were able to send the shelving unit back to them at no cost to us because our machine's under warranty still, and they fixed it, sent it back. There was a customer service representative who reached out to me frequently to give me updates and check in, so I was really happy with that experience, and now it's up and running great again. So I am glad we got that ironed out before we are in full swing of garden season. More recently, I've been experimenting with freeze drying herbs, and that has gone amazing. They hold their color, flavor. It's unlike any other way of preserving food. Not only is it very hands off, but it retains almost all of the food's nutritional value more than any other preservation method you can use. It retains the color, the texture, and it also enhances the flavor. Something that's really cool about freeze drying is you can rehydrate the food with any liquid you want. So, for example, if you were making soup and you freeze dried it, instead of rehydrating it with water, you could use something like bone broth to add even more flavor to that meal. So that's a really cool thing as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you want to see me freeze dry next. I am really excited to put this thing to work this garden season, and I will be sharing that with you as well. Thanks for hanging out with me today in my kitchen, and I'll see you in the next video.